So yeah, this is School Milk. This is my new pamphlet, and it's about two convent schools that I went to during the 60s. One for 7 years when I was little, and then a very different, also convent school that was a boarding school for all girls. So there was a lot of nuns in my childhood, and I think being taught by nuns for a total of 12 years does leave its mark. It seems to be something that fascinates people because they are just set apart. And we tend to think of them as quiet, prayerful, gentle souls, and lots of them are. But while corporal punishment was still allowed, I think some nuns almost believed that they were doing us good by chastising us with the ruler and things. And there was quite a lot of that in the first school that I went to, which incidentally is now closed down. So I think we're safe with some of the poems I might be reading. But so I'll read you a poem now, which is the title poem. I called it School Milk because one of the poems is called School Milk. School Milk. Squat third pint bottles have been thawing near the radiator. Chunks of ice remain. We watch sister's breath as she speaks, suck through straws, shiver with delight, then freeze as Danny starts to slurp out loud, goes too far, gets the cane. All the poems in this book are very short. They're all 6 lines, and they're a particular format called a Triadic Couplet, which was devised a couple of years ago by a poet friend of mine called Colin Pink. And it's a really good form for I found for setting aside a brief memory like this. So there's another poem which also features Danny. This is called Sister Act. May we treat each other kindly, she intones. Be gentle as lambs. Poor Danny gets the giggles, and quick as a flash, she's at his side, ruler raised, sharp edge slicing down on upturned knuckles, drawing blood. So many people who've read this book have asked me what became of Danny. And I have to say, I don't know, though I Googled his name, and the best I could do was a personal fitness trainer in Birmingham. So that may be him, or he may have changed his name. To be honest, he was also a bit of an amalgam of lots of other little boys there, including my brother, who was always getting into trouble. He says it's because he was terrified of the nuns, because they were swathed in black from head to toe. And I can see that was probably a bit freaky for some of the little kids. But it was a funny school. It was a small school. It was a very hand-to-mouth school. There were few nuns, not much money. They did everything. They sort of looked after chickens and grew vegetables, as well as teaching us. And they were a real sort of tough band, I think. And we may have learned French with an Irish brogue there and struggled to get beyond grade 1 on the recorder, but we did learn a fair amount. I learned that strong back tea, when you let it get cold, is enough to revive even the sickest Busy Lizzie plant. So that was a really useful bit of information. I learned from the boarders that the bathwater from a single tub can bathe up to 12 children, though it will only be warm for the first 2. And I learned that if you let your cabbages bolt, they'll feed many more mouths, though the taste will be bitter. The nuns at this first convent were Franciscan nuns, so they followed St. Francis of Assisi, who's the patron saint of animals and also ecology. And the nuns really did get their hands dirty, and they took on every job there was, regardless of their rank or their seniority. They were amazing, really. And here's a poem that talks about that. It's called Reverend Mother. Reverend Mother enjoys felling trees. She's been hacking away at a birch in front of us all playtime. And when its tall trunk creaks, she shrieks, "Stand back!" and everyone flees, except for her. She lies, felled by her tree. Witnessing this had a profound effect on all the children, as you can imagine. And I've actually seen references to it online in blogs about the school quite recently. So here's another poem not in the book, which I wrote about the same incident. It's called The Day I Missed School. The slam of the door is a welcome slam. I've stopped being sick and I'm bored. He races up, lands on my bed. Big brother with news to impart. Guess what? Reverend Mother was chopping down a tree at playtime and it fell on her. She's dead. I don't believe you. A tree can't just fall on you. When you say timber, it goes the other way. Maybe she forgot to say timber, I don't know, but she's dead. I saw the blood. He sniffs. Our mother appears. Tell him to stop lying, I yell. She glances away, says nothing. Back at school, they've all seen a dead nun. I know it's wrong, but I wish I had. So I spent a total of 7 years at that school, and by the time we left for secondary school, I think we'd all outgrown it long since. I remember coming in during half term to spend the day sitting a common entrance exam, and I was the only child in the school, and after struggling with the ubiquitous cabbage lunch in the visitors' parlour, the nuns waved me out to spend an hour in the playground for play. The swings were tied up, it was pouring rain, and there wasn't another soul in the school. It was my worst playtime ever. But another landmark of that final year was the 11 plus. So here's another poem called 11 plus. Frilly twists of wood shaving tumble onto desks as we grind in silence. Our pencils sharpened. Sister makes the sign of the cross, says we may begin. I jab the page with my thoughts, while Danny stabs his leg through his shorts. I suppose actually it was to their credit really that the nuns made so little fuss about the exam that sharpening our pencils was the sum total of our preparation. I think it's very different from today. Anyway, I got into the next school, a boarding school, and we can hear more about the nuns there in a while. But I wrote the book in 2 sections, and the second section was more about the boarding school that I know nuns, who I didn't seem to be able to get away from. So living with nuns for 24 hours a day is a bit bizarre, and you develop a sort of morbid fascination with the way they live and how they might possibly do things like take a bath and wash their hair when they seem to always be on duty and always wearing their habits. So here's a poem. Fire practice. We stumble into the night, yawning and shivering in pajamas. It's 2 a.m. and the shrillness of the fire bell fills our ears. At least we'll see what nuns wear to bed, hisses Joe. But they're all fully dressed. Perhaps they never sleep. The nuns, they had a strange life. They lived with us, yet apart from us. They ate and slept separately in a closed-off section of the building known as the community, which we were always trying to peek into, but never managed. We used to speculate on what it must be like to live a life of sworn chastity with only other nuns until you die. And this is a poem which is not in the book, which I wrote about these speculations. It's called A Vow of Silence. Do they glide to a sterile parlour as the clock chimes 4? Our Lady smiling gracious assent from her plinth? Do they huddle close, needlework soothing talkative hands, and hush at the swish of Sister Hilda's skirt? Have they floundered wordless with questions so dark and deep it's all they can do to stay afloat? Or do they find comfort in detail? Jam sponge for tea, clean sheets, the swish of Sister Hilda's skirt? Might there be among them one who dreams forbidden dreams, unfitting in this cloistered place, with its smells of incense and guilt, habits bent in fervent prayer, habits formed year on year? Might she kneel, eyes and fists tight shut, and sway at the swish of Sister Hilda's skirt? So some of their religious rituals were passed on to us, especially at the crack of dawn. At boarding school, they tore the dormitories full of sleeping pupils to make sure we all woke with Jesus. And this poem is called Hardwired. We'd wake to a holy water dispenser, thrust at our side in murmured prayer. We'd make the sign of the cross with hands still limp from sleep. Such was the ritual. I still catch my whispered Amen in the dim of an autumn dawn. There were other unusual customs too, for which there didn't really seem to be any religious justification at all, like this one, for example. Homage on the run. Skidding to a halt along the polished corridor, excuse me, I curtsy briefly to Our Lady's portrait. We are required to do this each time we pass Reverend Mother too. There have been several twisted ankles. Matron says nuns are not royalty. They may not have been royalty, but these nuns, on the whole, they were quite graceful in their approach to us. It can't have been easy sharing their lives with a whole bunch of hormonal teenage girls, and they did treat us with respect. The body and blood. A tacit excusal from games. Aspirin quietly proffered. Womanhood is something even nuns can't control, while we, on the brink of all we hope to be, grow pale. By the early 70s, a lot of the customs at the school were pretty outdated, and especially our uniform. So I've written a poem about that called The Uniform. 2 pairs of brown lace-ups, one for Sundays, gym shoes, ballet pumps, Wellingtons, outdoor plimsolls, hockey boots and slippers. Our feet have it good. Less so our pride as we sweep past in crimson cloaks and the skinheads jeer. Still remember skinheads, they're terrified. But however embarrassed we were, we did strive to make sure we still had our luxuries, even though it was boarding school and not home. So this one is called Pressing Business. To assuage midnight hunger, we sneak to the laundry room and iron ourselves some toast. We iron our hair too, to make it straight. Tonight, Irima's curls simply bubble and sizzle and stick. Someone has tried to make Welsh rabbit. So if you ever find yourself without a toaster, you know what to do. You get a sort of dense, chewy Melba toast with just a hint of asbestos from the ironing board. It's really quite novel.